What's up? Welcome to Bree the Humannequin. I am Bree. So happy to have you with me today. I hope the title didn't scare you off. Whatever I decided to title it, I'm still not quite sure. But I do have a lot of reservations about making this video. I know a lot of Black people are religious in the sense where they don't even want to entertain anything remotely demonic or satanic. So I am worried about scaring off some Black Christians here. And if that's the case, if you're still at that point in your Christianity, then you probably wouldn't even have clicked on this video. But you might have clicked on it because you're curious to know about my story. So the purpose of this video is I wanted to share my story with anyone who had a similar journey to me. Being a Black atheist is incredibly rare. Being an atheist in general is rare. I'm all about providing the solidarity and letting people know that they're not alone. I recorded this video 6 months ago and I was like, no, I can't do it. I don't want to scare people off, and I just wasn't confident about it. But I woke up this morning and my homepage on YouTube, I was just getting recommended a lot of Black atheists. And I was like, there are Black atheists? I didn't know that. And I just was binge watching their videos and they inspired me. So here we go. So in this video, I just wanted to go over what is my definition of atheism and how did I become a Black atheist when really all the odds were stacked against me. Somehow I managed to become a minority within a minority. I don't want this video to be too long, but I will start off with my background and my history. I came from a mixed denominational background in the sense really everybody was all over the place. My birth father was not in my life, but I always grew up knowing that he was a Muslim. His whole family was Muslim. My maternal grandmother's side were Jehovah's Witness. My stepfather's side, I believe they were Catholic. He went to Catholic school. He gets down on the side of the bed every night and does this. So I'm pretty sure they're Catholic. My mother's father's side, they were Methodist. And that was the church that I was the most familiar with. But how I was raised in my household was we were pretty much non-denominational Christian. I knew the basics and stuff. We went to church a lot more when I was younger, but as I got older, we stopped going, primarily because the home church that we used to go to was way on the other side of town. It was like a 45-minute to an hour-long drive to get there, and my family just never really found a church that was closer to us. As for the Jehovah's Witness side, during my early childhood, my family had decided to depart from it and just become non-denominational Christian. When I got into my 20s, my family got back into it, but I didn't really know much about the Jehovah's Witnesses or anything like that. That wasn't a big influence growing up. We still celebrated birthdays and holidays and all of those things. I knew the Bible stories. I was given a little kid's Bible that I used to read that had pictures, which I loved. You know, I had a fascination with religious stories and mythology in general. I probably should get clear on who this video is for, because if it's for other atheists, I can say things like comparing Christianity to mythology and some of the other examples I'll use later on. But if I'm trying to get through to Christians, then referring to their religion as mythology would be offensive. That depends on who the audience for this video is. So we'll see how I feel about it as I continue. I believed that Christianity was the one true religion and all the other religions were mythology, right? Greco-Roman myths, Hinduism, Buddhism. I thought that was just all mythology. And I was just lucky to be born in the right religion. All the other ones, Egyptians and Native Americans, just sucks for them. They were born at the wrong place and at the wrong time. And that's how I felt about it when I was growing up into my 20s. Such an arrogant way to think now that I'm like separate from it, but that's how I felt at the time. The first nightmare I ever had as a child, I was 4 years old. I was in pre-K and we had just laid down to take a nap. And my pallet that I was sleeping on just so happened to be near a grate on the floor, the grate for an air vent. And I went to sleep and I had a dream that I fell through that grate and down into the depths of hell. That's a very intense dream for a 4-year-old to have. Adult me thinks it's entirely inappropriate to teach a child about hell. But if you're a religious person, if you believe in the divinity of the Bible, then you think that you're doing your child a favor by doing that. Atheist me thinks that's really fucked up. It's super fucked up to do. But it started the relationship that I would come to have with God for the rest of my belief, which was he was always watching me, waiting for me to fuck up so that he could cast me down to hell. I was scared of him. When people say God-fearing is a positive attribute for a person to have, bitch, I was scared. I was terrified of God. It's so so weird to see the version of God that is portrayed as like loving, and he cares about you and he's looking out for you and he wants to forgive you and things like that, when that was not the version of God that I was aware of. I knew about Jesus and how Jesus died for our sins, but there was heavy emphasis on you should do the right thing or you're going to go to hell. So when I got to high school, during all that time, I was definitely Christian. I definitely believed in God. If anything remotely magical happened, I thought it was God. I was like, oh my God, that feather just blew across the table and perfectly landed on the back of my hand. That was God. I don't know what he's trying to tell me, but he's trying to tell me something. I thought everything was God, and I felt like God was just always watching me. But something happened when I got to high school. I actually made a video about this, but I took it down because I was getting a lot of creepy responses. I was okay with it at first. I was like, I'll be the sacrificial lamb because I want to talk about this and I want other people to know about it. Maybe I'll private it one day. But when I got to high school, I became very much interested in sex. Honestly, I was always interested in sex. There wasn't like a time before I was interested in sex, honestly. But when I got to high school, I started masturbating all the time, every day. I thought about sex all the time, every day. And I thought about gay sex all the time, every day. I'm bi, hi, but I thought about women and women, I thought about men, and I was like, I'm gonna go to hell because obviously I'm not supposed to be doing this stuff. Because of that, I would have dreams where I was going to hell again, just like when I was 4 years old and I fell through the grate. And I got scared. I stopped masturbating as much as I could control. I tried my best to stop my dirty thoughts as much as I could control. And obviously I was a teenager. My body was becoming more and more interested in sex, as is natural. I told my mom that I wanted to start going to church, like regularly. And we started on a journey of going to church, and we would go to different churches and we tried out different churches, and none of them ever really felt right. Then I went to college, and while I was in college, I joined Bible study, ended up having a crush on the girl who was teaching the Bible study, which was funny. But I went to church with her and her mom. Her mom was a pastor, so she was like very much in it. I remember specifically there was a time where I went with them to church and they played some worship music. This was a church that they had like a kind of youth group, and me and the rest of the youths, which I wasn't technically a youth. I would have been 19, but I guess whatever, that's close enough. They played a gospel song and people were feeling the spirit. They were crying. They were on their knees. They had their eyes closed, their hands up to the sky with their heads back. And I was just like, I am not feeling what she's feeling or he's feeling. I'm not feeling it. Am I broken? Is something wrong? I told the girl, I was like, I just wish I could be like you guys, and I wish I could feel the spirit like that. You guys just seem so devout. And she was like, yeah, you're fine. It's fine. It's a journey. I just was getting like cult vibes. I was getting culty vibes. Like she was just too happy. Everybody else was just too happy. She just was like always smiling, and she was black. Her whole church was black. And the other thing too was when we were doing Bible studies, she wanted me to start with Jesus. And I was like, I want to read the Bible all the way through so I know the whole book. But she was like, oh, I know you really want to read it from the beginning, and I think you should really just start with Jesus and start with these parts. And I didn't understand that. It's clear to me now that's the problem. I don't think people are reading it from the beginning like I did, because if you started from the beginning, you probably wouldn't have gotten to Jesus. After that, I had a little break from her because she got busy and she couldn't do Bible study with me anymore. And I had actually drugged some of my friends to do Bible study with me too. That's how into it I was and how much I really didn't want to go to hell. While I was still in college, I took some classes that were not directly about mythology, but they were mythology adjacent. So I, being a black person, you always hear about the wonders of Egypt and Nubia. So I took a class on Egypt and Nubia. And I remember sitting in the class, and of course we were learning about their gods, because that's what every ancient culture cares about and talks about, is their gods mostly. I just remember thinking like, man, I'm so lucky that I was born when and where I am, because they had it wrong. Ra, Horus, Isis, Anubis. those aren't real gods. But then in the back of my head, I was also thinking like, why would God not just go to the Egyptians and tell them that he was the real God? And then I was like, at what point would he have had to have done that? Because Egyptians is old. That's like a 7,000-year-old culture. Why did he wait for Moses? Why did he wait so much time? I'm like, doesn't he want to save the Egyptians too? Like, why wouldn't he just go to the Egyptians and do a burning bush thing with one of the Egyptians like he did with Moses? Why didn't he send Jesus back to the Egyptians' time? I was never like a young earth creationist type of person. That never appealed to me. I was always a kid who was in love with science and was in love with space and stuff like that. My belief was, I thought that God made the Big Bang. When God said, let there be light, I was like, that's the Big Bang. Obviously, that's in there. It didn't conflict with my belief. I was able to just look at Genesis as being a bunch of fables. I'm like, oh, these are just examples. These are just parables so that we can understand and all that stuff. I never really took any of it literally. So I really struggled with, if humans have been around for tens of thousands of years, why did God wait until just 2,000 years ago to send his son? Why did he wait so long? I was thinking like, well, what about all those humans who existed before that time? Did they go to hell because they didn't know Jesus, or were the rules different? I took other classes as well. I remember specifically, this was in high school, I learned about Native Americans and what they believed. And I remember thinking, why didn't God send Jesus over to the Americas to talk to the Native Americans? Now, if you are a Mormon, you'll be like, actually, he did do that. Unfortunately, there's no evidence that that actually happened. There are no Native American cultures that exist today that can be like, yeah, Jesus definitely came over here and we knew about him the whole time. Definitely before the white dudes got here and forced it on us. I had some troubles with cognitive dissonance with those things. Why didn't God send Jesus to the Aborigines to tell them about the good news? I couldn't reconcile the idea that so many people were suffering and dying without ever having known about Jesus, and thinking about how inefficient it seemed that God was kind of doing like this trickle down type of effect. I'm just going to tell the people in this area and then I'm just going to let them slowly take over the world, and yeah, then that's how everybody will be Christian. I just had a real big problem with that, and that was like one of the chinks in the armor that I had in terms of my religiosity. But I was too afraid to like pick it apart because I didn't want to go to hell. I was so afraid of going to hell. I didn't even want to entertain any thoughts. The way that I did lose my faith was really sneaky, and I can't imagine it happening any other way other than me just being like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna look up atheist stuff. I would never have watched a video like this 10 years ago when I was still a Christian. Was I a Christian 10 years ago? Yes, I was. I was on the way out. 10 years ago, I don't think I would never have said atheist. That word, even that word now, I am an atheist, but hearing that word out loud is scary. Another chink in the armor for me and my religiosity was when I learned that the Bible had been altered. Like, things had been removed and edited, and I also learned that the church used to use it to control people. Like, they would specifically give them certain sermons based on what they wanted them to believe. And I was just like, why would God do that? Why would God let the church corrupt his word? And some of these people were illiterate. They had no way of knowing the word. And I'm like, why would God let people alter the Bible? And once I found out the Bible could be altered, that really just killed it for me, honestly. I definitely was at least agnostic. And I remember I said it to my mom in passing. I don't know why. I think it was just on my mind, and I am a person who likes to talk things out. Obviously, that's why I have this YouTube channel. But I think I just like to talk out the things that I'm thinking and feeling, and I just was like, you know what? I think that I'm an agnostic. And you could just see the fear and shock in her eyes. And I said it, and then I kept walking because I just said it in passing, and I think I just wanted to get it off my chest. And then she didn't mention it. We didn't talk about it. But a couple weeks passed by, and I've been back scared of hell, probably had a nightmare that scared me, and I was terrified of hell. And so I went back to God and went back to Christianity, and I just took all of my doubts and confusion and I just stuffed them in my armpit or something. When you're consistently having nightmares, that can really fuck up your psyche. And that's what was happening to me. I was having nightmares about hell and demons all the time. I think what was probably causing that, I'm sure a Christian is going to have their own beliefs for why I was having dreams about hell. But I think the reason why I was dreaming so much about hell was because I was starting to question my faith, which was causing internal conflicts within the deepest levels of my psyche. It was going up against what I had always only ever known, and it was scary. So it only makes sense. That's where my mind would go. After that, I continued to read the Bible. I was having a really hard time with it. So I read a chapter of the Bible every night. For the most part, I found it to be incredibly boring. So many measurements, so many descriptions of wars and army stuff that I was like, what does this have to do with anything? How is this supposed to help me be a better person? And then some of that very logical, very analytical type of stuff was interwoven with what was obviously mythology, like Lot's wife getting turned into a pillar of salt and Noah's flood. Things that in my head I was like, these are parables. I believed in a more realistic version of God. And I think what happened first was I stopped believing directly in the Bible. I started thinking like, okay, the Bible is full of all these stories that I'm not really sure if these are real. They sound like crazy baloney to me. I'm not going to stop believing in God, but I had reached a point where I was like, the Bible was written by man and man is not God. And I kept my belief in God, but I was able to let go of the Bible. I was like, I'm just going to let go of the Bible. It's confusing me. It sounds like mythology. It doesn't sound like divine wisdom. And at this point too, like I was like just learning about other stuff. Like I mentioned, I was learning about other cultures. I mentioned how I was learning about, I had some adjacent classes that weren't directly about religion, but I had an art class where we were learning about all the different art pieces that were being made. And of course, all these ancient cultures were making art pieces based on their gods. And I would be in art class thinking like, man, look at these giant ass statues that they've made to their gods and goddesses, and they're not even real. According to my Bible, these gods and goddesses that these people were believing in for thousands of years aren't even real. Why would God just not go to them and talk to them in a burning bush and say, hey, that shit's not real. I'm the one true God? Why wouldn't he just do that? Seems like he was too busy hardening hearts and causing confusion intentionally in the Bible from what I read. I don't want to sound judgmental. I'm going to be honest. I don't like the God of the Bible. I think he doesn't seem like a good moral person, but maybe I'll get into that later. An incident happened. I think this was my last year of college. I ran into one of my cousins while I was on campus. Now, I went to Georgia State. It's like in the heart of downtown Atlanta. And I feel like downtown Atlanta is really a mishmash of what you're going to get. You're going to get homeless people down there. It's hood in some places, but then it's like nice in some places. There's lots of college students down there because there's lots of college campuses down there. And I was in one of the hood areas, and I heard somebody calling to me from off in the distance, and I look, and he was sitting in a baby stroller, and he had tattoos all over his face. And I was like, who is this talking to me? I found out it was one of my cousins, and I hadn't seen him in years. I had only heard about him through family members and how terrible his life had been. He had been molested. He had been raped in foster care. His father was in and out of prison his entire life. His mother dealt with mental health issues his entire life. His mother had physically abused him. His father had left him with friends that had physically and sexually abused him. And I saw him before me, and I was just like, I couldn't believe how different he looked. He was such a cute little boy, and there were a couple times where people in my family tried to get him, but he had such strong behavioral issues that the average person just couldn't deal with. And I just couldn't believe how much he had changed from being in foster care all that time as a child, to the point where he made a sexual advance on me, his first cousin. And I was horrified and forever changed. I will never forget that. I don't want to cry, but when that happened, I was like, how could God let that happen to my cousin? How could he let this little boy, who was 7 years old at the time, get raped? How could he let that happen? How could he let him be born to two awful parents where he would end up in foster care for years? How could he do that? What's so different between my cousin and me? We were born with the same type of innocence. He hasn't sinned any more than I've sinned. Why is it fair? And I'm really trying not to cry. Why is it fair that I'm here at college and he's here sitting in a baby stroller with tattoos all over his face, suggesting that we go get a hotel somewhere? That cousin right now is in prison. He's going to be in prison for a long time. He's got at least 10 more years. Obviously, he's not sinless anymore, but he was definitely sinless when he was molested as a child. And I just had a really difficult time. And the Christian excuses just were not doing it. God works in mysterious ways, all of that. I was like, that's not doing it for me. I didn't lose my faith right then and there, but it was a huge chink in the armor. I've been forever changed from that experience. After that happened, I graduated college and I started watching Cosmos. I was always a person who had a thirst for knowledge. I'm still that type of person where in my spare time, I like to watch videos from Kurzgesagt or videos from Hank Green, or I used to watch SciShow, which is Hank Green, but I started watching Cosmos and I loved it. I fucking love Neil deGrasse Tyson, okay? I went to go see him at the Fox Theater here in Atlanta and I love him. I absolutely love him. On one particular episode, he said something like, for centuries, humans have looked to the sky for answers to their world. Humans have a really good ability to detect patterns. And so when humans would look up in the sky and they would see certain things happening, they would try to attribute patterns that were happening in the sky with what was happening down here on the earth. They would use it to predict when they should plant crops or when it was going to rain or anything. He just implied that humans, we have a knack for creating gods. We are intelligent, curious beings. We want to understand the world around us. And there are certain things that are very difficult for us to understand, things like death, things like suffering. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And it would explain why so many of us believe in so many different gods. It would explain why everybody's coming up with their own gods and why we can't all agree on one God. Because like I said, I always had this issue where if there is one singular God, why is he not telling all of his children the same thing? I also had a big issue in the Bible with God having a chosen people. That really bothered me. I'm like, so what if I was born an Aborigine? I can't help that. I can't help if I was born an Aborigine and during the time of Jesus and I had to wait for the white men to get here and take my religion away from me and force another religion on me, or if I was a Native American, or if I was Inuit. I can't control that. That just doesn't really seem fair. So I ended up getting to a point where I started watching YouTube videos like Dark Matter 2525, and his videos are like comical. They're definitely sacrilegious. He would present the Lot story or the story with Samson and Delilah. He would present it in a way where it wasn't wrapped up in the Christian wrapper of reverence. He told it like, doesn't this sound ridiculous? Do you really believe this? And I would come out of those videos thinking like, he's right, that is ridiculous. Like, why was Lot gonna let those guys rape his daughters for the angels? Why was he okay with that? I don't think I like that. That was it. The spell was broken. I think once you take the scary out of God and you see other people that are making these videos that are considered sacrilegious and God hasn't struck them down, it made me more comfortable in exploring how I felt about my beliefs. And once I saw that I was able to think about these questions and I was able to ask these questions and God wasn't striking me down with lightning just for having these thoughts, which is what I felt. God was giving me very much thought crime vibes. And once I realized that that wasn't happening, I was free to actually just explore, how do I feel? And ultimately, I rationalized my way out of God. And I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I think this is made up. I think this is all made up. But yeah, but that's pretty much my history with it. Hopefully I was able to cut that down enough. It's not crazy long. So as far as my biblical concerns, mostly they centered around historical alterations in human authorship and also human censorship of the Bible. I didn't know why God would allow that to happen. Use of the Bible as a control mechanism. Had moral issues over slavery and the treatment of women. When I learned that the African slaves that were stolen from Africa had their own cultures, their own gods that were taken from them, and and replaced with Jesus, I don't understand how Black people can learn that and that doesn't bother them. It's like Jesus is untouchable for Black people. Like they hate all the other things that white people will put on them, and they'll call them the white devil, but yet they still believe in the white man's God. And I'm like, cognitive dissonance, bro. You don't feel that? You don't feel the cognitive dissonance? I did. Learning about the Egyptians and their own gods, I'm like, those gods weren't real. But when I learned about how the Africans had their own gods and goddesses, and the Europeans stripped them of their gods and forced them into Christianity, I'm like, I don't think I like that. I don't think I like that. I also didn't like the idea, like I said, I read the Bible. I read as much as I could. There's a lot of slavery in there. There's child marriage. There's rape, and there's a lot of moral justification. I had an issue with the cognitive dissonance when people would say things like, that was a different time, that was the culture of the time. And I'm like, but this is supposed to be a God in a book that is timeless. Why would God tell these specific people to write down this book during a time period where they were allowed to have slaves? Why would God do that? Why wouldn't God come and tell humans, hey, slavery is wrong. Here's the better way to do it. Also, women have brains and you shouldn't treat them like they're objects. Also, maybe don't fuck children. Just a thought. Maybe put that stuff in there. He seemed to care a lot about whether or not we ate shrimp and whether we mixed cloths, but he didn't seem like he cared as much when it came to slavery, unless it was his chosen people, which once again, like I said, was very problematic for me. Another issue I had with my faith was all the unanswered prayers that I had. I don't think God ever answered a single one of my prayers. And I don't say that in a bitter way. I say that in like strengthening my disbelief due to a lack of evidence. I used to pray for a lot of different things. Okay, so God did answer my prayers if you're counting all the times where I prayed that there wasn't arsenic in my food or something like that. Or all the times that I prayed I wouldn't die in my sleep. I used to pray that every night because obviously I was terrified of that. So I guess he did that. But any like unique prayers that I had, like he didn't answer any of those prayers. And I just kind of was like, I can't tell if he hears me because I feel like I'm talking to myself. The whole issue of I'm over here praying that I get into this specific college. Meanwhile, my cousin's getting molested in foster care. Stuff like that bothered me. And I was just like, I don't like it. I don't like to believe that God can help somebody find their car keys, but he's allowing my little cousin to get molested in foster care. I just had a hard time with that. Omo Igbo, the agnostic, she's one of the people that was recommended to me today, and I watched a lot of her videos. And she mentions in one of her videos that she felt like becoming an atheist felt like she was a part of the Truman Show. I would say for me, it was more like, and please don't take this the wrong way if you are still a Christian or questioning, but I just want to be honest. I would say it's more like when you're a kid and you realize that Santa Claus isn't real. It felt exactly like that. When you just are like, oh my God, it's my parents. My parents are obviously the one. Why did I think that a guy with flying reindeer and a sled could go to every kid's house in a single night? You know what my issue was with Santa Claus? Honestly, it was not that he was going to every kid's house. My issue with Santa Claus was like, what about the kids who aren't Christian? Is he going to their house? I used to think that as a kid. I'm like, is he not going to the non-Christian? I'm like, that doesn't seem fair that only the Christian kids, because I was like, what does Santa Claus have to do with Christianity anyway? He's just leaving out on Jesus' birthday. That's just the day that he fly out. Pretty sure Santa ain't up there riding with Jesus, but I don't know. I think I was thinking about it a lot, but that's how I felt like. Really, I can't think of a better example. And as an adult, when I see other people who believe still, I can't believe that people believe in something that to me is so obviously not real. And I feel called to proselytize my atheism, or just atheism in general. Do I think the world would be better if it was atheist? Not necessarily. I'm not trying to go that deep in this video. How do I feel about Christians now? I don't love the cognitive dissonance that most Christians have. I guess I would have to say most Christians have to have if you want to live in a modern moral society. You have to have cognitive dissonance. I think that makes you a good person, but I don't think that makes you a good Christian. My feelings on it, honestly, are unsettled. I think especially because I'm coming to realize that most Christians haven't read the Bible. A lot of them are just going to church and parroting things that they've heard from church or growing up or things that they've heard in their family. I don't think Christians are sitting down and studying the Bible and saying, oh man, I gotta stop eating shrimp. I gotta stop mixing cloths. I just feel like people aren't doing that. A lot of Christians obviously fornicate and they make excuses for it, and it just waters down the message of Christianity to me. It makes it harder for me to dedicate my life to something when it seems like they're not really all in it, I guess. Because asking me to give up the one life that I have for a maybe life that you can't prove to me exists, that's a big ask that you want me to do. And the burden of proof is on the Christian, because the Christian is the one that's making the claim. I know Christians want to hit people with the, well, how do you know there's not a God? I'm like, the burden of proof isn't on me. You're asserting that there is a God, and we don't have any empirical, tangible evidence that there is a God. So I don't have to prove that there's not a God because we don't have any evidence for there being a God in the first place. You have to prove that there is one. That's like if you tell me there's an invisible horse standing over there. I don't believe that there's a horse standing there. And that's like you saying, well, you have to prove why there's not a horse standing there. And I'm like, the burden of proof isn't on me. The burden of proof is on you because you're making the claim that you have to provide evidence for the claim. So not you specifically. I'm talking to an imaginary Christian. Really just an imaginary religious person in general. But I was a Christian. That's why I'm talking to Christians. So am I atheist or agnostic or something else? The definition of an atheist is a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. An agnostic, let me read the definition for that too. An agnostic is a person who believes that nothing is known or can be known of the existence or nature of God or of anything beyond material phenomena. A person who claims neither faith nor disbelief in God. Neil deGrasse Tyson, my lover, describes himself as an agnostic atheist, which is basically you're a person who believes that we do not have enough evidence to prove that there is a God. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It is very straightforward. So I wanted to, I think lastly, probably hit on how does my morality work now that I no longer believe in a God? First off, let me just tell you, because some people do not know, atheist does not mean I'm a devil worshiper. It literally means that I don't believe the devil exists. I know that, have you ever seen that episode of American Dad where Stan, the dad, prays to God for a best friend? He's a Christian. He prays to God for a best friend, and God sends him, I don't know if God sends him, but he gets a best friend. And the best friend turns out to be an atheist. And he tells the best friend, we can only be friends if you believe in God. The best friend commits suicide, and then the best friend comes back to life because he made a deal with the devil. Now he believes in God, but through believing in God, he also now believes in the devil. So I just tell that story so that you can see that people who are devil worshipers believe in God. Okay? Devil worshipers are, I guess, technically theists. I am not that. So do I think that you need religion in order to have morality? Obviously not. Just look at all the harmful religions that exist that promote human sacrifice and genocide, including the Bible. I personally do not think that there is an objective shared morality. I think that's why certain religions think that it's okay to force women to live certain lives and that they are inherently different from men in ways that limit their freedoms. And other religions look at that religion and think that's immoral, right? The lack of shared objective morality really only strengthened my disbelief in God. I think that's why when it comes to looking back on the past in any context, people always say things like, it was a different time, right? Hey, just 10 years ago, it was okay to make trans jokes. 10 years before that, it was okay to make gay jokes. 10 years before that, it was okay to make black jokes. And people will always be like, it was a different time. So the fact that our collective morality as a culture is evolving means that there is no objective morality that we are just all born with. Right? Or that we just all know. We're all figuring this out day by day. That's why people keep getting canceled left and right for things that they thought were okay back whenever they were doing it. So one reason for why humans have any type of morality at all could be is in large part due to evolutionary development, right? So our capacity for empathy, cooperation, love, and some basic moral intuitions likely evolved as survival advantages for our species, right? So we would have developed pro-social behaviors because working together and understanding others' feelings helped our ancestors survive and thrive. And that explains why we see basic moral behaviors like caring for young or helping injured people or helping people when they need assistance, even in other animals, right? Animals have the capacity to care for their young and the capacity to love as well. It's not unique to humans. If we didn't do those things, then we might not have progressed as a species. There's also rational self-interest and social contract theory. Philosophers like Hobbes and Rousseau argued that humans developed moral systems through an implicit social contract, meaning we agree to certain rules and behavior standards because they benefit everyone. So don't steal, don't kill are universal, not because a deity commanded them, but because societies couldn't function without them. Also, philosophers like David Hume argued that our moral sense comes from our natural capacity for empathy and reason. We understand others' suffering and figure out fair solutions to conflicts without supernatural guidance. And we see that in many cultures across the world. Ultimately, the key point is that just as we developed language and art and science through natural processes, we developed moral systems through our inherent capabilities for empathy, reason, and social cooperation that were brought about through evolution, right? We wouldn't be here if we weren't pro-social. One of the mistakes that I made as an atheist was assuming other people were atheists based on their personality types and saying disparaging things about God or religion in front of them. I don't want to do that. I think it's easy for those of us who don't believe in God and view God as Santa Claus to talk down on religious people, because to us it looks like the emperor's wearing no clothes, right? That's another good example for how I feel about religion and Christianity, and more specifically is I was told that the emperor was wearing clothes. I don't see the emperor wearing clothes, but everybody else around me is saying that the emperor is wearing clothes, so I'm gonna go along with it too because I don't want to be the odd person out. And that's very isolating, which is why I wanted to make this video. And I don't really have room to judge, because even though I don't believe in God or gods or Christianity or any of those other mainstream religions, I have seen some shit I can't explain. I definitely have prophetic dreams and I can't explain that. My dog is so annoying. She's just so agitated. Can you see her back there being annoying? Astrology works for me. And I hate telling people that because I hate feeling like there is some type of supernatural, superstitious thing that I believe in that has no basis in reality. But that's also why I try to be a lot more respectful to religious people now. I try to understand them. I actually do a lot of research trying to understand why people are religious in the first place. What would I say to anyone watching this video? Maybe you're questioning, do I want everybody to become an atheist? I can't make people see the world like I do, but what I would tell someone would just be insert clip of Morty saying open your mind. And I think that the reality of how I became an atheist is I had to let go of the fear that the truth would lead me away from God. I had to choose the truth, whether God was at the end of that journey or not. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about in this video. I am worried about the reception. I'm not worried about it. I just don't want to scare anybody off because that's not my aim. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I just want you to insert Morty saying open your mind again. That's all. And if you're not willing to do that, but you're still here for my other content, yeah, I'm down with that too. I will say I was super respectful in this video because I hardly said bitch. That's a big deal for me, you know? But I thank you for watching. And before, for anyone who's thinking about saying, I'm gonna pray for you, good luck with that. Honestly, if you you pray for me and I become a Christian again, you might be a witch, okay? That just might be the case, all right? Anyway, I thank you for watching this video if you made it all the way here. I don't know if I was helpful or not. Hopefully I was able to get my point across, and hopefully I wasn't too disrespectful. I know that comparing God to Santa Claus and the emperor who was wearing no clothes is probably not gonna go over well with some people, but I don't know how else to say it. I just want to be very candid, but I really did try. Definitely give this video a like if you liked it. You can dislike it if you don't like it as well. Any engagement is good engagement. Leave me a comment. What are your religious affiliations? What's your religious history? How do you feel about the existence of God? I know a lot of people who will say, I don't believe in a religion, but I do believe in God. What's your religious journey? How do you feel? Are you questioning? I would love to know if there are any more people of color out there specifically who are questioning. I think for a lot of us, we come from conservative families and conservative backgrounds, and that can be really tough. So I want this to be a safe space for those of you. And if you don't believe and you want to tell me that I'm going to hell, cool. Tell me that too. I like any and all engagement. I keep saying that, but it's true. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day or night, wherever you are, and I will see you next time. I don't know where this accent's coming from. Anyway.